All right. You ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Welcome to Gaming the System, the only podcast coming to you from the unusual and unexpected intersection of gaming and theology. I am your host, Caleb Allen, joined by Ryan Somerville. What's up? You don't get the how you doing.
What's that?
You don't deserve it.
Wasn't that the old Budweiser commercial, right? Calling everybody up and doing the what's that thing.
That was. You know they brought that back for a little bit, where it was like a couple in a nice restaurant, and I think it was the server and the husband started doing that. Like both were males and be like, "What's up?" And then the wife kicked him under the table.
The funny thing is I bet you that those the guys that did the original I bet you they made a ton of money on that, and then faded into obscurity because obviously you don't hear about them anymore.
But I mean, after making a ton of money on it, do you really need to worry about being popular?
No, I would fade into obscurity if I was able to make a good money. I've often thought to myself, if I went pro, you know what I want to do? I won't really worry about becoming a superstar. I just want to sign my first rookie contract, because the minimum I think is like $400,000.
Mm-hmm.
Make that for 3 or 4 years, and then be done.
Retire.
Find a regular job.
Right.
Not beat my brain into oblivion.
Yeah.
For a
See,
few dollars.
my problem would be going pro with wrestling. Which
But since that's all fake, you'd be all right.
True. I would also have a lot of conscience issues, like if I was with the WWE, and because I would never appear on any pay-per-views. That Fourth Commandment, bro. Yeah, buddy.
Yeah. Which is funny. Mark Brown posted something about the WWE.
I saw that
over in Saudi Arabia, and they're going to observe some sort of prayer thing. And Mark Brown made the pointed observation that they don't do anything to observe the Lord's Day.
Well, that's because they have an established religion there.
That's true. That makes a big difference.
And quite honestly, the fact that I don't know what their quote Sabbath keeping entails for Muslims.
Do they have Sabbath keeping?
That's what I'm not sure about. But I know Friday is their holy day.
But they do insist on prayer, and they have honored that prayer.
So if that's all that they insist on, it's not surprising in an establishment country to have an intermission for their established religion to do their holy time, their prayers. I didn't find that surprising at all. It's because people are super sensitive to other religious beliefs that are, especially in the Middle East where they're so ingrained into that culture. You don't think twice about someone pausing on a Friday or really any day for prayer when that's the religion of the land.
Yeah. So basically, let's put it this way. If you want people to stop engaging in economic activity on the Lord's Day, you need to become an establishmentarian.
Basically, the United States and every other nation needs to become RP.
Yeah, pretty much.
So,
or actually just original Westminster Confession.
Basically RP. Basically. That basically allows for the qualifying of the testimony that's since been had.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Anyway.
Yeah, so.
Where are we? What are we doing?
Well, if you remember last time we took up the issue of the knowability of God.
Yes, indeed we did.
And so now we're getting into some of that which can be known through special revelation.
All right.
And specifically, the being of God.
The being of God.
Yes, sir. So what is meant by the being of God?
Why do I always have to start out answering these questions?
Why are you interrupting us?
I don't know. Sorry, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. My phone is our timer to try to at least keep a limit on how long we go, although it's been relatively ineffective, and it just rang. But anyway, the question is, why do I always have to give the first answer?
Well, your punishment for your phone going off is giving the first answer now. So.
Well, by being, we merely mean that God is a being that exists. He's an entity, right?
So essentially, it's would you say then that it speaks to his self-existence, or is that more of his essence?
Well, he is a being that self-exists.
Fair enough.
There you go. That is to say that all other beings are brought into existence. All other beings are sustained outside of themselves, whereas God has always existed by virtue of who he is. He's not been brought into existence. He's self-existent. He exists because he's God. And nothing else can cause him to exist other than the fact that he exists because he's God. And not only that he doesn't rely on anything outside of himself to exist. He is a self-existent, self-sustaining being. That is what is proper to him as God.
That's an important apologetic point, because I know in many of the conversations that I've had with those who are against intelligent design, one of the questions that they always bring up is, well, who created God?
Right.
So this idea of and it's another reason why in our apologetic endeavors we should seek not only to persuade people of the existence of a God, but of the self-existent God of Scripture. Mm-hmm. Because if you're not doing it with a specific goal to have people come to faith in God as he's revealed himself in Scripture, then you're wasting your time, is what it boils down to. You're wasting your time, and there's really if all you're doing is just trying to get them to agree to that a deity or deities exist, there's really nothing more to be had in the conversation.
Yeah. You're looking to get them to understand that a particular deity exists, not to be theists, but to be Christian theists, Christian monotheists, one God.
Right.
And that God is, as we know him, revealed in Scripture. And that's the funny thing. You get that argument. So, God is the uncaused cause. Right? The uncaused cause, to use lofty philosophical terminology.
You would.
And nothing causes him to exist. He exists because he is God, and he is the one who has caused everything else to exist. And that's problematic. I've even actually seen some atheists argue that that's special pleading, that we are saying, or we are relieving the tension of, well, how did God come to exist by special pleading, by viewing him as something different than the rest of creation, which response number one is duh. Obviously, we're viewing him as something other than the creature because he is the creator. He is the transcendent, self-existent God. So duh. Secondly, it's interesting to note that ultimately, you only have two options if you're denying the existence of God. If you're an atheist who believes in materialism and evolution, you only have two options. You either have to posit that matter itself is eternal, in which case then matter itself is different from everything else. All right, human beings are not eternal. All the things that are composed of matter, none of them are eternal. They all have ends. They all die, decay, they go away. So matter would be the one thing that is exempt from the rules of the rest of all of creation. So they have that same problem.
By itself, though, because once multiple matters come together to create something.
Well, just matter as the idea of substance, right? So matter either has to be self-existent, or you have to be ultimately be like, you know what, science can't actually tell us anything about what existed before what exists. So in other words, you have to become what is called a solipsist.
Define that for us.
I'm not going to define that for you.
You're so cruel.
Basically, it just says, you know what, we exist. We know that we exist. And so that's where we start from, and we move from there. And anything that happens before that, we can't know, and we're not concerned with knowing. It's really not even all that necessary to know.
Before we exist, like as individuals, or as the
universe?
The universe.
We know that the universe exists. It's not germane to know how it came into existence or what happened before that, that doesn't matter.
See, this would be the point where in my Sunday school class I would get looks like, what does that even mean?
What even mean?
Like, basically that matter can somehow be self-existent, or that it not be important that we know what happened before.
Well, your only two options outside of God are to just believe that matter is self-existent, self-sustaining, and eternal, or that we can't know, and so we shouldn't bother being worried about it. We should just stick with what we can know.
There's a lot of problems with that,
Well,
and I'm going to choose not to go into them.
good.
So the other aspect is the essence of God, or as some of our confessional or creedal language says, the substance, which is, I guess, getting at, as you put it off camera, the manner of being, which gets more into, I guess, the self-existent or divine qualities. So essence would be something that is subsumed under or with being, but is distinct from it.
Yeah. So I'll put it to you this way, as I did off camera. So you are a being, correct?
Correct.
You are an existing thing. You are an entity. But you are a particular type of being. That is, you are a human being, right?
Right.
Your essence as a being is humanity. Your substance as a being is humanity, and all that humanity entails.
Right.
So when we're talking about the substance of God, we're talking about what type, quality of being he is. In other words, answering the question, what is or who is God? Right?
Okay. So then being starts with God's existence.
Yes.
And is really just, to quote scripture, it's just a statement of I am, that he is self-existent.
Yep.
And then essence takes you a little bit deeper, though you start to get close to that, the secret things, as we read from Deuteronomy, where we know that God is divine, and that he's a spirit who has not a body like man, as our catechism says.
Yeah.
But what would a spirit be?
That's the thing. So
we know what humans are from our own experience.
Yeah, in terms of, if we were talking about human beings and their substance, we would talk about your chemical makeup, the molecules that make up your flesh and bone and blood. And of course, we would actually get into you as a particular human being, your character, personality,
right.
All of those sorts of things wrap up what we mean by substance in terms of Caleb as a human being. With God, since he's spirit, when we're talking about substance, we can't talk about the stuff that he is made up of, because we can't comprehend it. We don't know what that even means or even entails. He's not made up of matter. He's not made up of molecules. It's really getting into territory, as you said. It's the secret things of God in terms of what it means by his substance.
It's also complicates itself, the subject matter, because when we think of, you mentioned character and how character is part of one's essence, part of a human's essence. That complicates matters when it comes to our consideration of who God is, because we recognize that our character is often formed, at least in part, by the circumstances in our life.
Yeah.
But to have an all-powerful, eternal, self-existent being who's wholly outside of everything else, like, there's no circumstances in life to shape who he is.
Correct. Yeah.
So that just goes and like widens the chasm between our understanding as experiential from the human standpoint and with God.
Right.
And what it means to be.
Yeah, the finite and the infinite, right?
Right.
The perfect and the imperfect. So for instance, your experiences shape your character, that is your personality traits and your Well, your character, for lack of a better term. But God has always possessed his character traits. Again, we're using analogical language, human language, to describe something that is beyond us. But his character traits, he's always possessed them in perfection, without need for them to be developed or to be shaped by circumstances. He's always possessed these things. He's always possessed them perfectly. Whereas as humans, our characters are determined by and they're influenced by the things that we undergo and that we go through.
Right.
But there is a way in which God has gone through that process, and that is, of course, as the second person of the Trinity.
Right.
Which we'll get into Trinity, we're kind of
in a later
get
video.
ahead of ourselves. But Jesus Christ, the God-man, certainly went through growth, like a human goes through growth. So
that's
that.
That's another important thing to keep in mind. One, that it's natural for, even though we're not talking about Trinity and the Christian God existing as a triune God, that'll naturally come out in discussion because it's part of his being, part of who he is. It's also a way of distinguishing between like other monotheistic religions that don't have a triune God. Right. Islam being a prime example. But then with that, I think there's often a conflation of what it means to be triune, and also for the second person of the Godhead to have a human nature as well as a divine nature. And we see this in questions such as, did Christ on earth, did Jesus actually learn anything? Well, of course he did. In his humanity, he had to learn how to eat, how to chew his food, and to chew it before he swallows. It's a problem we are currently having. Tobias likes to shove food in his mouth and quickly swallow it. It's like, dude, when it comes to oranges, it doesn't work. It just doesn't.
Chew, boy, chew.
Chew. Other things like Joseph, his earthly adopted father was a carpenter. Well, Jesus didn't come to earth and just instantly have all the knowledge of carpentry in his humanity. And so it's important to make those kind of distinctions. Like there are things when we say that Christ became, that the Son of God became man, and he took on a human nature, that he also went through growth as humans go through growth.
He was truly and fully human.
Right. 100% God and 100% man, 200% as Shylin puts it.
Yeah.
In his I'll put a link for it, but in his rap on the hypostatic union.
That's quite the content for rap.
It is. He did a phenomenal job. So.
Wow. So moving then circle back to where we were after that rabbit trail.
Hey man, rabbit trails are great.
The way that ultimately in Scripture we define the being of God, who he is as a being, as an existing entity, as a self-existing entity, self-sustaining entity, is by his attributes,
right?
By his self-revelation. Can't comprehend what his makeup is, like we can the physical makeup of a human or any other physical substance. Don't know what that means, what that entails. But we do know who he is as a being in terms of his attributes, in terms of his character, things of that nature. But.
Right, and that's where I'll start with a word of caution. Like, analogies always break down. Right. I'm about to make an analogy.
Please make sure it's heretical.
That's modalism, Patrick.
Yes, indeed.
But no, like that in a similar way. Humans are defined, and you know most about someone by getting to know their character, and so it's not like equal God's attributes and our character. I'm not saying they're equal, but it's analogous in the sense of you know someone best when you know their character, and that's so how do we get to know a being of infinite perfection, who's always existed and has never been shaped by external circumstances? Well, by digging into his attributes.
Right. And not just his character, but it's hard for me. I'm trying to think of a word to use. Maybe abilities. Because when we think about his attributes, we get into things like omnipotence. That is, he's all powerful. His ability to do whatever he pleases.
Right.
Right. Or his omniscience. That is, he's all knowing. So his ability to know everything exhaustively. So his character, his abilities, for lack of a better term.
Right.
Is really what we mean when we talk about attributes. But that's how we know who God is as a being, by his attributes, by his character, by his abilities, by the traits that define who he is as revealed in Scripture.
And there's we don't want to go much into it now, because if we do, then this episode will quickly go from a reasonable amount of time to an unreasonable amount of time.
Right.
So we'll simply state that in a future video we will take up God's attributes, and we will begin by looking at that classic distinction of incommunicable attributes versus communicable attributes. And for those of you who don't understand the terms, you're going to have to wait until the next episode.
That's what we call a cliffhanger, folks.
Yeah, buddy. Good, bad, or ugly, or all of the above. But that's what it is. So we appreciate you tuning in for this discussion on the being of God. And we will look a little more at it when we take up the subject of his attributes. As always, we would encourage you, if you have any particular questions on the content that we've covered in this video, or even in previous videos, post it in a comment on our video. We'll take it up either on one of our gaming recording sessions, or when we meet to do these ones. But either way, we can't answer your questions if you don't ask your questions. Someone once said that the only stupid questions are those you don't ask. And so your questions are stupid if you don't ask them. So with that glorious ending, we'll catch you next time. Until our next video drops, then see you later.
What's funny is that
Good and necessary consequence.
my youngest daughter belches like that. Farts like a man. Like the other day I was walking by, I was like, kid, 2 weeks old, you fart better than I do.
How does that make you feel?
I'm cool with it. I think it's hilarious.